Hey guys, how are you all doing? Cariel here, and we're back with another Throne and Liberty video. If you watched the last video I posted, the one about the PvE build, that's right. As promised, we're here now to talk about the PvE build, so sit back and make yourself comfortable. If you didn't know me before, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any videos about Throne and Liberty. This channel is dedicated exclusively to that, alright? With the latest game updates, we've now got challenging content, which is the raid content, both normal and hard raids. This has brought about the need for us to build specific setups for PvE. And today we're going to talk exactly about that. The build we're going to cover here is a wand and crossbow build, wand and crossbow. So it's considered a fury build. And in today's video, we're going to go over everything about it in detail. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any information about this kind of thing. Like and share with your friend who's looking for a strong PvE build. Alright? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about. Let's switch cameras here so we can take a look. Alright? I'm going to let this video play in the background, which is from the raid, okay? The damage you're seeing here doesn't compare to the damage of the final build that I'm going to show here in detail. After all, in this build I was still missing some items, right? And I ended up changing everything, so now I have a new build. This build is currently dealing around 7.5 million damage to the dummy, you know, that scarecrow in less than a minute, okay? So it's a pretty strong build. I'm recording this video after the latest July update from the 24th of July, which brought a nerf to the curse skill, where now curse can no longer stack infinitely. So don't worry, this is a build focused on dealing damage without relying on curse for more than 30 seconds, alright? That's why I, thank God, waited a bit to see how things would turn out. And that's why the damage shown here isn't comparable, right? If you look at the screen, you'll see the curse is going above 30, because this was recorded before the nerf. And I tried to recode in hard mode, right? But unfortunately, the encoder I used here didn't work. So let's talk a bit about the build. The build, it's a crossbow and wand build, right? So most of your damage will be based on curses and curse explosion. So it's really important for us to have, you know, a lot of damage, right? So we have a substantial amount of cooldown speed, which effectively lets us trigger explosions many times and also utilize the skill bar quite a lot because we're constantly dealing a significant amount of damage and as a result end up using all of our abilities. So for that, it's very important that in this build you have not only cooldown speed, maximum mana, mana regen, and also some passives and some mastery, because in the end, if you don't have one of the masteries I'm going to mention to you, which is the Ascendant Dragon, you'll end up losing some damage. So it's extremely important in this build to keep a constant rotation of abilities being used so that you can maximize your damage with the explosions you'll be able to trigger. So it's extremely important for you to pay attention when I show the specializations and mastery so you don't leave anything out. It's a build that has a lot of life regen, right? Because as I attack, I'll be able to recover thanks to the passives, you know, the one masteries. But if you want to maximize your damage because you have a healer backing you up, you can also do that. However, it's a build that in the end can't reach that much health. It reaches at most 17,000 health with the final items. So it's extremely important that you know how to execute the mechanics. So if you want to have a lot of damage, you lose the healing, right? You take out the healing to maximize the damage, but at the same time, you have to dodge the damage mechanics and also have your healer there with you. So it might be important if you want to maximize your damage even further, to have, for example, skill damage resistance runes and so on. But overall, it's a build that's extremely comfortable. You'll be consistently maintaining your damage. I would really recommend that you play with healing, right? Using it, right? The healing mastery. So you attack and you heal yourself and you'll constantly be dealing around 7.5 million damage per minute, right? On bosses, it's actually a bit more because in the end, the bosses in Throne and Liberty are pretty stationary, right? They do have mechanics, but you can keep up your damage, and since it's curse damage, you end up being able to deal damage without even hitting the boss directly. After all, you just leave the curse there and it keeps proccing all the damage. However, it's a build that requires skill, right? You constantly have abilities to use, and if you don't have the ability to move quickly and position yourself in the best way, you won't be able to achieve this kind of thing. Since it's a very squishy build, basically a glass cannon, whether you like it or not, you need to reach very high attribute stats. So for example, with this build, you reach 99 dexterity, 97 wisdom, and around 50 perception, right? To get increased range with the range percentage, you know? But for strength, for example, you get at most 25. So it's extremely important that you stay organized. For PvE, it's not just good here, but it's also good for the Gate of Infinity, right? Which is the Gate of Infinity. Those bosses you have to do weekly, as well as for solo dungeon. It's one of the best possible builds you can have for fighting bosses. It's for world boss content, right? For regular boss content, it might have a bit less damage compared to the Invocator build, right? Which is staff and wand. But even so, it still has one of the best boss damages in the game. Now, for Archboss, if it's an Archboss piece, right? In this case, the fight will be a bit shorter than with Conflict Archboss, but you can still easily rank among the top 5 with this build and have excellent sustain, right? And if you have a team with healing, then it's even better, right? A team with healing, a team with Link, right? From the Greatsword and also from Sword and Shield, as well as from the Spear, you'll have very high consistent damage, easily making it into the top 5 with this build as well. You just need to keep in mind that if you go for high damage, you have little life regen, and as a result, you'll need to nail the mechanics. So that's extremely important. But overall, it's one of the builds with the highest single target damage, right? So it's really cool. There are a few disclaimers I need to give you, which are as follows. On Calantiri, I'll let the video play here. On Calantir, which is a boss that requires break mechanics, for example, to free the group, this build leaves a bit to be desired. After all, the Curse Witch is the damage we have doesn't apply to special objects, like that orb that traps someone in Calantir's mechanic, which is one of the last bosses in the raid. So in this kind of situation, it's not a good build in that regard. So for example, notice now that someone is about to be pulled, and hitting this orb with her damage is really bad because you don't have all your abilities available to use. So keep that in mind. But for hard mode, and I believe for extreme as well, this is definitely going to be one of the best builds. Also, if you play with the passives, with the life regeneration masteries, I have no doubt that you'll serve as a second healer for the team if the team loses its ability to sustain itself, all right? You can also play with this build even as a tank, right? Because you'll constantly be attacking and as a result, killing yourself. Even if you have low health, you can tweak your masteries a bit so that in the end, you can reduce your mana consumption and increase your regenerative and health capacity, right? So overall, it's an excellent build. Let's get into the game so I can show you since I've been talking for a while now, all right? Switching over here, we have the build setup here in the quest log. So here are the items we're going to be using, okay? So notice we're already using the Heroic Wand. Here are the attributes we're able to reach, all right? 96 Dexterity, 98 Wisdom, 50 Perception. So here we basically have 2 pieces of the Spectral Seeker and 2 pieces of the... Here, look, 2 pieces of the Spectral Seeker and we have 2 pieces of the Void, all right? These pieces are extremely important, right? So that we can get both attribute sets. One attribute set is for dealing damage, general damage, and the other is to increase critical. So that's very important. Just like the accessories are also very vital here so that we can get important attributes, right? Which are dexterity, wisdom, and perception, all right? The passive we're going to use is Deckman's, but it's also possible to use the passive from T-Vent, right? From the T-Vent wand. But that's up to you, right? And for the crossbow, we're going to use Ackman's crossbow, but you could also use Berendir's crossbow. I would recommend Ackman's crossbow. After all, with Ackman's crossbow, we have the passive here, Selfless Diffusion. And with this Selfless Diffusion passive, right, it's active, right, to always be buffing our damage. Selfless Diffusion itself has a mastery, right? It has a specialization that makes it so that every time in any position we're attacking from, it ends up being considered as a back attack. And back attack is one of the tools we have to always be dealing damage, all right? So these are the items we have. Our focus is really to reach these very high attributes here, all right? So that we always have the most convenient buffs, right? So here in Dexterity, we'll always have critical hit at the maximum. Here in Wisdom, we'll always have mana, cooldown speed, and mana regen at the maximum. And here in Perception, we have buff duration and range very high, right? The farther away we can hit, the safer it will be for us to keep a good distance from the boss, all right? Now, the specializations, the resonances that we're going to be using, in general, they're always going to be related to mana, After all, we're using a Spica Mastery that will consume a lot of mana from us. So whenever possible, go for mana regen, maximum mana. Most of the items are set up this way, right? Exactly because this is a PvE build, not a build focused on PvP. So we can put everything into mana. If you're having a lot of trouble with your health, right? Because in the end, look, this build only gets up to 13,000 health without the buffs and such from the build, you know, from the group. Yeah, you can remove some runes, right? For example, here we're using a rune that gives maximum mana. And here as well, look, maximum mana. So like you can swap out some of these runes for health runes, right? So feel free to do it however you feel is best. But it's really important to have, above all, mana cost efficiency, maximum mana, and also mana regen, right? So whenever possible, for example, where is it? I think it's on the cloak. For example, look, on the cloak here, we have the trait for maximum mana, mana regen. We also have the same thing here on the accessories, right? So go after these attributes because they're going to be very important. And why is that important? Because here in Mastery, notice, we're going to be using this Mastery right here. Look, it's a Mastery here. What happens? Every time my mana is above 60%, each basic attack, each of my skills, everything will be consuming 4% of my maximum mana, right? Of my current mana in order to deal more damage. So it's extremely important that I have a lot of mana so that I don't run out and can keep dealing more and more damage. So look, I deal 7% of my current mana as additional damage. So it's a lot of damage that I'll be dealing with maximum mana. And that's what's most important for this build, right? So it's extremely important for you to reach these high numbers. Also, guys, since we're using a damage build, right, for PvE, always stay still so that we always have passives, like, for example, Weaken to keep increasing our damage even more. So everything else here is exactly so that every time I use a lot of skills, I end up dealing even more damage. So stay still while playing with this build. Always keep your mana above 60%. So coordinate with your healer so that they use the passives that will give you mana, right? The passives from the skills, like for example, the put on the ground and things like that, exactly to avoid this kind of situation. It's such a strong build, really so strong that, for example, here in our group, right, in this video, we had 2-3 melee classes, right? And even so, with a group like this, as you can see, we were able to surpass the Damagent by a lot of a team made up entirely of DPS. So notice, here we have the second team, and in this second team, basically, there were only DPS, not even a tank, and just one healer. So we managed, man, a lot of damage, and notice the difference here. We were able to take down the boss's entire health here, even with him in the 50% mechanic. He started the mechanic, people took a while to come, and look at the difference in health between the two bosses, right? So it's a build that deals a lot of damage, exactly because, yeah, and here it wasn't even optimized, okay? So let's just jump into the game so we can show once again how things are gonna look. Here are the items, all right? Mana cost efficiency, cooldown speed, magic endurance, all right? To be able to tank. Here, the Void Stalker with maximum health, buff duration, magic endurance. Here, the cloak with buff duration, mana regen, magic endurance, all right? The buff duration on the Void Stalker pants, just like any other pants, is really expensive, right? And here, yeah, I still haven't added the resonance. The resonance on this one is mana regen. The resonance on the helmet is maximum mana. Here we have our cloak with mana regen and maximum mana, skill damage resistance, and maximum mana there from resonance. Here are the gloves, all right? Transcendent, regeneration, endurance, attack speed, range, and mana regen. And finally, to wrap up the armor, the boots, right? Spectral V-Sig with regeneration endurance, move speed, maximum health, and mana regen resonance. As for the accessories, I didn't trade them much because I only traded the ones that are evolved and actually make sense. After all, I still don't have the other accessories that are part of the final build. So notice, in my final build, for example, I would use these accessories here. This one is an evolved Deep Draconic. This one is an evolved Nebula accessory. This other one is another evolved Nebula accessory. And finally, the earring is also an evolved Nebula, alright? I'll leave both builds in the link, alright, in the description, and it's tough. Just like this other one here is also an evolved item, but it's easy to get. In other words, the ones that are easy to get are these two items, all right, as accessories for the final build. This one is from Pak Lunaru, which is also dropping easily. But these 3 items here, look, I haven't put them in the build yet because I haven't gotten them, all right? So that's why I have the other one here, which is exactly to substitute those items. Here is the Evolved Deep Draconic, which you can get. Here we have an accessory that's evolved, but you can also get it. Here is another evolved accessory that you can also get. And here is another evolved accessory that you can also get. But all the base versions of these accessories I'm showing here, you could also use, and that's exactly what I'm doing here in-game. I don't have, for example, the evolved Deep Draconic here. So I'm using the base version, but I haven't traded it exactly because I want to get the evolved version. And I also haven't traded this other item here because I don't have the evolved version. I just put it in the sync at plus 12 and that's it. Now, these 2 items, since they're already evolved, I traded them without any worries, all right? So they're already traded here with maximum mana, skill damage resistance, buff duration, and the other one here with violent overturn, right? With skill damage resistance, maximum mana, mana regen, and resonance with mana regen. These items here, if you don't have the patience to get them, you can get them through the summon crafter, all right? The crafter here can easily craft the evolved Deep Draconic at a cost of 480 coins. Here we have what I'm currently using, right? Which is the violent overturn, also evolved, also costing 480. For the ring, I'm also using the evolved one, right? Which is the Celestial Ring, but the base one would work too. Here we also have the Devote, right? Flame Birth, also evolved, but the base version works too, which is what I'm using. And finally, the earrings. But all these items can be easily obtained here in the tier 4 dungeon, all right? The tier 4 dungeon drops all of them except for the Nebula items, okay? That's exactly what I did, and that's what I achieved. Now let's move on to the skills, all right? The skills we're using are exactly these. Here are the passives. Let's go to the specializations. Here are the 1 specializations. Then take a look at the quest log, okay? Here are the various crossbow specializations, offering distinct advantages and playstyles. And finally, we have the masteries, which provide significant enhancements to your abilities. All right, let's take a look here. The 1 masteries. The crossbow masteries. My crossbow is at level 159 and my wand is at level 185. And finally, here we are going to be using exactly the main mastery, which is incredibly important for this particular build. Then this one here is designed to help you stay perfectly still and maintain your position. This other one here is specifically for gaining more perception and awareness of your surroundings. And finally, we have the little lightning bolt here, which provides a significant burst of power, all right, so that we can achieve more damage. And for artifacts, we're going to have 4 pieces of the Kal Harbinger set. Here I'm using 5. We're going to use the Abyssal Beast, right, to get the passive, you know, for more damage. And here in this other slot, we can use any of them, right? But the most important one is a green one that I don't have here. I haven't picked it up yet, but it's there in the quest log. It's pretty easy to get. Let me grab it here to show you. Is this one right here, okay? It gives you base damage plus 22 for 10 seconds. So you can equip it as well. Everything's all set up here. The most important attributes, as I mentioned, are mass heavy attack, mass critical hit, and maximum damage. Here, you can go for both defenses and damage reduction to avoid both damage. Here, it doesn't really matter. This other one here. Heavy attack, mass heavy attack, and mass critical hit chance. Here, mana regen, and stamina regen. Stamina regen is very important, okay? And in this other one, there's nothing, right? Because it's green. So overall, guys, this is the build, okay? Currently, with this build, I'm able to reach these attributes. 3 strength, 96 dex, 94 wisdom, and 50 perception. And we have 6,600 gear score, all right? All the items, as I said, still have improvements to be made, right? After all, we haven't gotten all the items yet. In the guild, here, the items I need have dropped. So it's possible to get these items from the guild. Hello, bridge burners. And let's try to put together a decent build, right? So that we can complete all the PvE content in the game, all right? So Overall, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you're gonna build it, I highly recommend it. I think today it's one of the best PvE builds in the game, okay? For raid content, contract content, world bosses, and PvE content in general. And it's a really fun build, alright? I'm really happy to be playing with it, to have researched it, to have believed in its potential, and even though it got nerfed, the nerf to the curse, so it can't reach infinite numbers anymore, it still works. So if you're looking for a PvE build, I highly recommend this one. Check out the description, follow the channel for more information, and see all the details, alright? Subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with your friend who's looking for a PvE build, and that's it, alright? See you next time. Thanks, see you, I'm out!